Hello, welcome to another episode of Vicky Dis. I've had a long, hard think about today's update, really. I've had several ideas. I'm putting together some research, taking a while, to do a video on economic structures, terminology and such. But I'm struggling to find certain bits of information I'm still looking for, so that one's on hold, and at some point I'll get there, but I'm not going to give a date to it. I'm also at some point going to do a video on complex PTSD, and that one I've started a couple of times, and I'm not going to do it today, but at some point I will do. So I had a request from a friend about political journeys, how you got to where you are. So yeah, this one doesn't require research because it's just about my life and certain kind of ethical values I suppose I've had throughout my life. I started when I was very young. I was very religious. I championed the terminology turn the other cheek. I had quite a difficult childhood for many reasons, one of which was I was severely bullied at school, and I hate it when people talk about that, like it's, but it's just one of those things. I think politically it impacted me a lot, and I used to refuse to fight back. I was a massive pacifist, which if you know me now is hilarious, but when I was younger I was a massive pacifist, and I was physically beaten every single day at school by a large group of girls. So there's probably about 7 or 8 girls, and I remember on one instance being circled and punched and told and they would stop if I punched them back, and I refused to. I was chanting in my head, just turn the other cheek, turn the other cheek, and I wouldn't at all. I wasn't going to be forced to be violent by other people. And that is my stubborn side that I still have. I refuse to do what other people tell me, even if I was going to do it anyway. As soon as I'm kind of ordered to do something, I find that quite difficult. And I suppose that leans into the more anarchistic side of my personality and why I'm strongly against communism. I couldn't deal with having or living in a country that tells me what to do, how to act, and whatnot. I know there's probably various branches of that, but I'm definitely more libertarian in my politics. And I suppose as I grew older, I learnt to defend myself. I had to, and I learnt to fight back. And I suppose for a long time I made people scared of me, because if people were scared of me, they left me alone. And quite often you'll find that you don't actually have to do anything within that. If people find you a little bit intimidating, they tend to not mess with you, and that helps in many ways. And I mean, I didn't really grow up I wasn't in a household that was of a privileged position. I wasn't really aware that I could get involved in politics. We were not really working class. My father was in management, and we had periods of extreme poverty because he was self-employed for periods, and that was difficult. But then there was periods where we had a lot of money, so we kind of wavered around that. But I wouldn't say we were brought up working class. My father's family would have been working class. My mother's family was upper middle class, so I had quite an influence of both, really. I think I fit in both sides of that camp in some ways. And I worked with horses as a manual labourer for a long time, before going into more managerial roles myself. And I went to university, owned my own home, etc. So there's a lot of mixes within that. And I suppose growing up, we were made to watch the Berlin Wall being pulled down in '89, and I remember it quite vividly. And I didn't really understand the significance of it being fall. But I remember the images, and I remember how important it was, and that we all sat down as a family and watched that on the news, and there was some talk about it. I don't really remember much about that, but it was a really big impacting thing. And I don't think I really was aware before then much about Germany, so it's interesting learning a lot more as I've grown up, about East and West Germany and the impact and how monumental that was. But it is one of those moments like Princess Diana dying, I suppose, and 9/11, that you know exactly where you were at that time. And my family has always been staunch Labour. My father's side is 100% were very predominantly Labour. My mother's side would have voted Conservative, but they were very, very wealthy. They owned a post office in Wrexham in Wales, and it was the only shop that stayed open. My grandmother, bless her heart, was a very fiery woman, and you know, family politics and whatnot. You know, there's many views on various ways, but she stopped an armed robber a couple of times, different people, but they were everyone in the area knew that you didn't mess with my grandma, and she was only 4'10". And she'd chase him out the shop, and they sold absolutely everything, and not many shops in the area at the time stayed open due to violent crime, so they made a lot of money by being able to open in a very poor area, but they became millionaires, and they very much were of the view that you made your own money, that it was their money and they made it, and no one else would have anything to do with it. And if you wanted to have that kind of level of success, that you did it yourself, and that included family and everybody else around them. And it was you look after yourself, and you. Yeah, if you're successful, then you warrant and live with those rewards. So, I mean, the first time I ever voted, the year I was 16, I believe, was the first election. And that Labour would have been already in government. Tony Blair wasn't. I was 11 when Labour won their first election during my lifetime. And the second time I would have voted Labour. I remember going into the local village hall and voting Labour. But again, it was very influenced by parents. It was before social media, well before social media, and before really influencing by any outside sources. So you voted what you were told and brought up with, I think. Or there were people maybe who voted and went off things like colour. I don't know, a recognising name, but generally people were very set in their ways the first time I voted. And then, I used to work hard. I was surrounded by a lot of Conservatives. I didn't really realise it at the time. A lot of people who were working class, weirdly, were very much of... It's more conservative values than politics, I think they would have stood for. So very nationalistic, very much kind of, that they don't like change. They like to keep things the way they were, and there's a lot of people like that I would say probably I worked with and was influenced with in that point. And I didn't really like to rock the boat back then. I kind of just listened and agreed with people, and I was quite tough at that point in my life, quite tough, and I worked hard, very manual. Working with horses is hard work and no money, earning £1.70 an hour, and is hardly a lot of money. And I think then I had another job, which was £2.50 an hour. So the second time I voted, the first time would have been 2001 or 2002. And the second time I voted, 2002, I'm trying to think. The election system must have been really messed up, because, I voted in 2010 and I voted Liberal Democrat. I was one of those students or graduates that suckered into, that whole message, and I was very... At university before that election, I had very conflicting views, to be honest. I think at the time I wasn't educated in politics. I was more going off the people around me, and I never say that I know the answers, and I'm always trying to educate myself, but I suppose I'm outspoken with what I think at the time, and I'm definitely open to educated debates that are respectful and polite, and I'm definitely up for changing my views. And there was a period where I suppose I could have been, I mean, I've always been libertarian, and that's never changed, and I've always cared for other people. I wanted to look after people, but I suppose I'd never experienced the benefit system. I'd never grown up in a council house. I'd never understood how unfair the system was, and I'd always worked, and I'd worked two, three jobs at a time, even while in education. I got a job from the second I could get a job. I had paper rounds. I was 16 when I got my first proper job at the weekends. I was at school in the week, and I was working on the weekends, and sometimes in the evenings while I was at school. And everything I owned, I paid for and worked for myself. I was never really given anything. I bought my own horse when I was 16. I was working weekends at a cake factory. It was on £5 an hour at that point. It was amazing. And I saved up and bought myself my own horse. I cared for my own horse. I bought all its food. And so, yeah, I suppose I had a view that there was a lot of people on benefits that were quite lazy, and that it was just easier, and that if you really wanted to go out you could get a job. And I mean, in some cases I think that there are people that do fall into that category, but there's a lot of people who, as I know myself now from being disabled and struggling with work, I mean, I run my own business now, and I work from home. I don't have, I get PIP because I fall into the brackets, but I don't get any income-based assistance. And when I needed it, I didn't get it because of just the loopholes and different things, and really horrific advisors and the problems with the DWP. I mean, I had no idea until I got there, and I think it's all learning and growing and living through these things that you understand that the system is not easy, and there are people out there that know how to play the system, and unfortunately there's a lot of people, because of the focus on the people that are abusing the system, there's a lot of people that need the system that miss out. And I think that's a real problem. Sorry, I've got a tremor and it's just firing off in my right hand, so unfortunately you're going to have a mild shake now. There's nothing I can do about that. Yeah, so there was a time that I think I was revolting against the two-party system, would be my main thing in that. I didn't really agree with either system. I didn't agree with either party. I didn't like that neither of them was saying anything different. I just wanted to do anything. At that point, I'd have voted anything other than those two parties, other than BNP. I'd have voted anything that would maybe have got a positive result and for a change in the system, which is something that I see now a lot, even though I'm been a lot more involved in politics. I see that same mentality, and I respect that mentality because I was there, and I was at that point in my political journey that I was just so fed up with the establishment and with the system. I just wanted something to change, and I didn't know a lot about it. I thought I did, but I didn't. And so yeah, I voted Liberal Democrat, and that all went to pot, as we all know. And very much, I've always been incredibly anti-Tory and anti-Conservative, and I suppose that's been ground into me from being a lot younger. But generally the authoritarian hard right is it's against everything I believe in. There are aspects of capitalism I respect, but I don't like its current form. As a business owner myself, I'm all for entrepreneurship, but I do believe in paying your fair share in taxes and funding various things within the community, which goes against current right-wing conservatism. So in some ways I can relate to some people who would be classic conservatives, but modern conservatism not at all. And just the negative, I think I hate the politics of fear and the politics of negativity and the politics of just, where you look down on certain aspects of society when they've never been there, they've never lived that life, and I find that frustrating. So yeah, and then I suppose, I always played a lot of sport, and my main focus was always sport. And then I had my car accident, and then I became disabled and was unable to play sport. And I kind of had always said to myself, if I'm unable to play sport, I'd probably pursue learning and educating myself as a priority. A lot of pain in my right arm. I'm holding my phone, so just, bear with me with all of that. So as I was unable to do what I had done my entire life, I started to educate myself. The internet's an amazing thing. The things you can learn, the articles you can find. I really kind of took advantage of that. And I, at some point, I always felt that joining a political party was for people of certain status, and I didn't really see myself as one of those people. And I thought, you'd have to pay a lot of money. You do. If you're in a Conservative member, you have to pay a fair amount of money to join. You get perks like free books passes for the elderly and such like that. But, it was never something I really knew a lot about. And then it was the European elections in 2014. I took a quiz for who I should vote for, because I was like, well, I'm not going to vote Lib Dem again, I'm not going to vote Tory, I'm really against Labour, I don't really know what to do right now. So I voted, and it came out something like 98% Green, and that was like left field, literally, being hit round the head with something. I was like, well, I've always been in nature. I've always lived in nature. The woodlands for me are a very spiritual place, and somewhere I feel very comfortable and at home. So, I agreed with it, but I wouldn't have ever voted Green because I felt it was a very one issue party, single issue party, and that's not something that I ever believed in specifically. I'd support them, but I wouldn't say you'd want a single issue party to run the country. Still believe that in a way now. But the Greens are not a single issue party, and that surprised me because I think a lot of people think they are. And although I think the environment is a central focus and it steers the way they think about things, they have policies on everything and views on everything. And actually, when you start to learn more about that, it really opened my eyes. So I decided to join the Green Party in 2014, just before the European elections. And I didn't really know anything was going on where I lived with the Greens. There wasn't really an active party at the time. So I don't know, somebody messaged me or I messaged them and said, I don't know what's going on. And they said, well, start one. So I'd never joined a political party in my life. And the first thing I did when I joined was found the Lincoln Young Greens, which is for 30 and under. And I think at the time I was 28, 2014 maybe. Or 29, I could have been 29. So I ended up founding the Lincoln Young Greens, and I started meetings. And then I had someone contact me to say they were part of the Lincoln Green Party, which I hadn't really realised existed. I never really heard anything from them. I live outside of the city, so I hadn't been caught in any emails for new members or anything. In fact, the first one I was invited to was East Lindsey Green Party, and I think I went along to that, and it was really far away. It was about an hour's drive. So it wasn't something feasibly I could afford to do regularly, and I didn't really feel very connected to the members there. I didn't really find it of interest. So I think that's where I founded the Young Greens and thought, well, I'd rather be with energetic, positive people, rather than I didn't really click with them. Then I found out the Lincoln Green Party existed, and I went along to a few of their meetings, and it seemed to be going somewhere. I was elected to be chair of Lincoln Green Party, and run that. But I had a real issue with a number of male members at the time. They seemed to have an issue with females having opinions that were not led by other men. And I really struggle, as I said before, with being told what to do, following orders. And I had a guy tell me he was really shocked and disgusted that I hadn't listened to his advice and followed what he said. And I was just like, what? Like, when are we even alive right now if I, as chair of a party, should be following some of the men in the group with their views, you know? I mean, it was we made an elected decision. They won, and we enacted what they said. So I don't understand why I needed to be attacked over my views, and it turned a bit. There was a lot of underhand stuff going on, as is in politics, and it really turned me off. So I left. I didn't want any part of that, and I'm not saying the group's the same now. I haven't been involved in them for a while, but yeah, it was something that I'm not going to be around negative people. I've been around too many negative people in my life, and I wasn't going to really put up with that. And there wasn't really a lot of structure at the time in disciplinaries or complaints procedures. The person that I actually spoke to was quite rude about it, and yeah, it was just, I was just like, no, yeah, I'm not going to be involved in that. So I focused more on the Young Greens and carried on building that up. I then attended a Midlands conference for the Young Greens and discovered they were founding a brand new Midlands region, and I ended up standing for election, and I was elected something that I can't remember now, but basically co-chair. There was 2 people for the role, and I was one of those elected to found that. So I founded the Midlands. It was the whole of the Midlands Young Greens, and I like creating structures, and I'd worked in management at this point in my career before I became disabled. So I was there, you know, creating systems to put in place, communication, meetings, structures, you know, different things, starting new Young Greens groups. I think we were the fastest rising. I mean, there was not a lot going on in the Midlands when I started, so it was quite easy to do this really, but we were the fastest growing region in the UK for Young Greens, for new groups, and I was just aiding the training and setting up of that. And then from within that, there was a group of us that were quite active. As with other committee, there's usually some people that are quite active, some people that are not. And then I was brought in to found the National Young Greens Senate. And a group of us went down to London, to the Green Party headquarters, and we sat around and we created again a load of structures and policies and systems in place, and created founding documents, etc., training stuff, and it was a couple of days. We went down for like a long weekend, and created all of that and founded the National Young Greens Senate for the Green Party of England and Wales. And then it wasn't long after that, there was a lot of issues came to light in regards to problems with sexual harassment and bullying towards women within the party, from certain men, not necessarily the same people I'd had issues with before, but obviously it was a sore point for me, so it was something that I immediately was like, right, I need to get involved in this. And then I was asked by a friend if I stand to run Green Party Women, which is the national feminist organisation within the Green Party, which again has completely changed since I ran it. So, you know, what's going on now is nothing to do with me. We had a different angle completely. But basically I was contacted by a survivor of sexual assault within the party and asked if I could take over that role and champion improving the complaints and disciplinary procedures in regards to sexual harassment. And from that I worked for a long time on this. We took about a year to write this. We did a lot of research. We spoke with a lot of senior members. We talked with a lot of people who'd had issues in the past. We met people who had been members years and years before that had issues. We looked at solutions. We looked at funding. We spoke with the National Treasurer. We spoke with current and past leaders. We did a lot of work, and we created a really robust policy to tackle how sexism and sexual harassment within the party could be taken seriously. And we were the first party in the UK to really grasp that and tackle that and go forward with it at the time. And we wrote a policy, and I worked on it, and I spoke with a lot of elected politicians, including our MP and a couple on the London Assembly, and spoke to them about how we could make this work. And I presented it in front of the National Party in 2016. It was voted through unanimously, which, if anybody has been to any Green Party meetings of any sort, you'll know that's really rare. So I was very, very proud of that. And I created a really good, I think, policy as a starting ground. And we looked at developing other areas of complaints procedures to follow around that and include other areas, not just within that, such as trans rights, LGBTQIA rights, various other areas that had disability, discrimination, that had been left before, to make sure that we were, tackling things properly and not just hiding it. Which I think historically, not just I think within all political parties, things have just been brushed under the carpet. People should toughen up. I thought that was unreasonable. We needed to get that done. So I worked on that. And then I left Green Party Women. I was too old for the Young Greens. I founded the first West Lindsey Green Party in Gainsborough, and I set that up, wrote the constitution, got the committee going, started to build it up, and in 2017 I stood for election for the Gainsborough ward for the Green Party. I was involved in debates against Sir Edward Lee, who's been the incumbent MP for probably coming on for 40 years now. Nobody in West Lindsey has always been a Conservative heartland. It's one of the strongest, kind of safest seats in the country for that. So it was never about winning, I suppose, because out of all the seats, it's the least likely you're going to do anything. And it was amazing. I mean, I'm not somebody that has ever been... I struggle to feel proud of myself, and I never look at what I've achieved. I always am striving for the next thing, and I just keep going, and I just have this real drive to improve things and make things better for people. And I think coming from a difficult background of where I started was really important for me in championing the underdog, I suppose, and wanting to just make things easier and better for people who are from more disadvantaged backgrounds, or are from certain special interest groups that maybe have been ignored in the past or have had it harder. And it was always something I was really keen on doing. So we did really well in the election. I was unable to walk door to door because I struggle with walking, and I couldn't, I could do 2 or 3 doors and then I'd be too ill to do anything for weeks. So doing a street is just absolutely impossible, and it was really difficult. The Green Party actually funded my seat. It was £500 admission to stand for Parliament, as one of their disabled candidates, which was greatly appreciated. And I ran a digital campaign as somebody who works in digital marketing and web design, and I did an entirely digital campaign. Everybody else was door to door, but as a disabled candidate that was impossible. So I had a website, I did a lot of radio interviews, newspaper interviews and various things. We had the radio debates at Lincoln, BBC Lincoln Radio, which was touted I won the debate, so I was very pleased with that. I've had a background where I've had to stand up for myself and I've had to argue my point a lot, so that helped. Edward Lee actually at some point turned his back on me because he couldn't answer my questions, because I knew a lot about the economy, and I think that surprised everybody that the Green Party candidate actually understood economics, and they didn't, surprisingly. So when I was talking about facts and figures and how things can be funded, none of them had even thought of how they could come back to that, because it was really unexpected. So I was really proud of that. And Sir Edward Lee, actually, to his credit, came up to me at the count and said he was genuinely really impressed at the debates, and was really surprised and thought I had a really promising career ahead of me in politics. And I was approached by both the Labour and the Liberal Democrat campaign managers and asked if I would move parties and stand for them in the next general election as their candidate, because they thought I'd run a really good campaign and they were really impressed with it. So I felt really proud that I'd got to that point from, not many years before, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4 years before, not even knowing if I could join a party, to then standing for the National Party at a general election, which was really cool. And then it was shortly after that, unfortunately, my health was really declining at that point. I was really struggling more, and I left active politics shortly after that, and became very, very, very sick, and was unable to leave the house for a while due to illness. And I suppose now I follow things online, I read things, I continue to educate myself, but I'm not involved in active politics at all. I have focused on other things for now. I've had my son, who's now 15, coming on 16 months old, and I suppose my priorities have shifted. And I'm not saying I'd never go back into it, but right now it's not really something I want to do. And I think there's a mix of people in politics, and I don't genuinely believe that everyone's in it to make things better. There's a lot of people in it for their own ego. There's a lot of people in it for their own gains, for pushing their own agendas. And I suppose in some way we all are. I mean, whether that's because you believe that the world should be a better place, I mean, maybe that's an agenda, and other people believe that tax havens should be increased. And that's a choice other people have made. So yeah, I suppose that's what I want to do now. I'm not involved in active politics. I'm not an active party member. In fact, I've left the Green Party. I'm not a member of a political party anymore. I just believe that politics is accessible to everybody. And it's not as... The people I met who are elected representatives, generally, I have found not to be very intelligent and to not really understand a lot. They don't really understand economics. They sprout a lot of PR, without swearing, stuff that irritates me. It really frustrates me that there's a lot of people don't understand what they're being... It's not that they don't understand. I mean, I'm not saying that people are stupid in any way, because I don't believe that at all. I believe that more people would be more capable of being in elected office than the people currently in elected office. I believe there's a lot of people that gravitate towards those roles who are wrong for that position. And I want to inspire people that maybe think that politics is confusing, they don't understand it, to understand that you can do it and you can learn this stuff and you can have make more informed decisions when you're voting. And no matter what that is, whether you genuinely follow different political parties that are different to me, I just think understanding how things work is really important. And I found, for me, watching videos has helped me and educated me better than reading, especially non-fiction books I really struggle with as somebody with ADHD and dyslexia. I do read short amounts, and I read a lot of articles, and newspaper articles in particular, and various research papers, but I tend to not read huge documents, and I tend to do bite-sized research and pull things together, but that's just how my brain works. And lots of people think in many different ways, and I think there's many ways that people can learn and be more involved in politics. And I think it's important that people are involved in politics and they understand what politicians are really saying and what they're really voting for, and know that everybody can make a difference, and as an individual you can make a difference, no matter what your thoughts are, political alliances are, whatever. To me, I find now, as I always have, but more so now, environmental policy really important. I find I will fight for freedoms of many people, specifically oppressed groups. I really struggle with racists. I really struggle with anybody that's homophobic. I really struggle with people that look down on lower classes. If you've never been there, I don't think you should be criticising. And again, in my past, I have done. So I'm not saying, I think you need to not be so precious over what you've said or what your past or what you believe, and just go with it, learn, speak to people, put yourself outside your comfort zone. I'm always outside my comfort zone. I find that more comfortable than in the comfort zone. And yeah, so I'd love to hear other people's political journeys, how you've got to where you are, whether you're just starting, and if there's anything specifically you'd like to know, or you think you've listened to this and you'd like some other videos similar, let me know. And I'll either, some of the stuff I can research and do a bit more informative, some of the stuff's just my personal experiences. Hopefully you found that video interesting. Give a like and subscribe. Any shares are greatly appreciated. Any comments, if they're polite and respectful, are also greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.